for an effective teach-in for Radical Black History Month? How many people can we get to join us at the next picket line? How many sandwiches do you need for a national conference on organized resistance? How many of those sandwiches need to be vegan? All of them. So more solidarity begat more learning about global struggles, domestic struggles, and more often than not, the common denominator revolved around math. And more precisely, the math of our global economy that consistently failed to deliver prosperity in a very, very rich world. And despite our massive wealth, I observed an underlying worry that we were taking part in a zero-sum game. A game where it was believed that the only way for one side to win was for the other side to lose. I would later learn how this mindset had been employed to devastating effect to create our views about race in this country. I learned how the story of labor is the story of race. I learned how racial hierarchy was employed to defeat solidarity, to pit workers against each other instead of just so they would not come together based on their shared concerns over fair pay and safe workplaces. And from my new math back to the old, I found my statistics book again. By this time, I was in law school, and I was interning at a place called the Center for Constitutional Rights. And I had sought out CCR in particular because they were using an innovative legal theory to hold corporations like Shell accountable for human rights abuses abroad. And so I was able to join CCR and be involved in a case against Shell and cases where child labor, environmental destruction, slavery, those were all the means to justify the ends of wealth accumulation. But it wasn't just abroad. These injustices were present here in the United States as well. And again, there was no gray area here. It was just the sort of unequivocal right and wrong that drew me to this work. Then I was put on a case that brought it all together. It was a civil rights case against a large employer that had a pre-employment screening test that was screening out people of color. So hundreds of people of color were deprived of a good job solely based on the color of their skin. And so what we were able to do with statistics was show that this had a discriminatory impact, and this was against the law. So from that case on, I was hooked. I was hooked on the idea that we could unravel some of the impact of structural racism through how we enforce civil rights laws. I was hooked on the idea that we could level the playing field and give folks access to economic justice. It was a beautiful thing. And in the years since, I went on to help hundreds of everyday Oregonians in my law practice, representing mostly workers who had their livelihood stolen based on sexism, ableism, racism. Representing workers like Eduardo, Santiago, Miguel, who looked around and noticed that they were segregated from the white workers on their job site and given the most dangerous tasks and no safety equipment. Workers that only wanted what we all want, which is just to be treated fairly. And during this same time, I've seen the idea of this zero-sum game continue to rear its ugly head. As more people of color began to achieve some level of fairness in the workplace, there were those that seemed to believe that more opportunities for historically marginalized communities meant less opportunities for others. And still, the story of race is the story of labor. But that's not the end of the story. Because the story of labor can also be the story of cross-racial solidarity.
That's right. That's right.
And okay, so if you haven't read this book yet, I highly recommend it. The Sum of Us by Heather McGhee. I'm seeing a lot of head nods, which is awesome. And so as Heather McGhee explains, this sort of coming together across racial lines is what gave us the success, and things like the Fight for 15. And she calls this the solidarity dividend. So you can see why I love the math component of that. And it's the idea that we actually end up creating more and better when we work together. And we've seen this here in Oregon and the fights you've actually heard about today with Starbucks, Central City Concern, Growing Seeds, New Seasons. We've seen it in Oregon in our fights for paid family medical leave, for pay equity, for safe workplaces. And yes, we have a lot to do. But this is the good news. We are not passive participants in our lives, right? We have a choice. We get to choose. We get to choose how we organize ourselves, how we organize our state, and how we organize our society. Where we are is simply the result of a series of decisions. And we can make different decisions to get somewhere else. So, what keeps me motivated in this fight? What keeps me going? Well, what keeps me going is the sum of us. You know, what you get when you add up everyone in this room, because what we all have in common, I think, is faith. Faith in something bigger than ourselves. Faith that what we do matters. Faith that we can do more by uniting, and that by coming together we can make a difference. Faith in solidarity and the dividends that it can provide. So today I'm still fascinated with numbers. It's just now I'm focused on how together we are greater than the sum of our parts. Thank you.
Yeah.